So I met many of you last night. I've known some of you for longer than that, but I'm Elizabeth Sawyer. I'm the president of Hood to the Holler, which, if you are not familiar with, is a political engagement, civic engagement organization here in Kentucky. This panel today is Social Justice in Louisville 2020 and beyond. Hood to the Holler fits right into that. So we are an organization that was born in 2020. Charles Booker, after he ran for Senate, the momentum that was built in his campaign towards the end really came out of the movement. It came out of Injustice Square and everything that was happening in the national attention that was here in Louisville. And so even though he was not successful in that race, when I've been in politics for a long time, and it's always a question when you lose about how do you lose up? What do you do? What is next? And so for Representative Booker, that was founding Hood to the Holler in 2020 and continuing that work. So when he decided to run for Senate again, he asked me to come on board as the president, and I'd stepped away and actually sort of sworn off politics back in 2015. I was sick of the red versus blue. 2016 made that even worse for me. And I only came back to doing this work because Hood to the Holler is not about the red versus the blue. It's about what unites us instead of what divides us. It's about how do we build a more reflective democracy. And how do we do that in a way that is, though, explicit about talking about issues of generational poverty and racial justice. And a lot of times people talk about the people in our Commonwealth who have been forgotten. And I don't think that people are forgotten. I think that people are exploited. I think that those people, the people in power, they have not forgotten the people who feel forgotten. They know exactly where each of us is, and they are exploiting our land and our air and our personhood and our economy. And so we want to work to bring all of those people who have had that lived experience together and figure out how do we take back our democracy. So as somebody from Louisville, I also just wanted to say that you are in a place in Louisville, Kentucky that has a very long history of doing social justice work in an intersectional way. Whether in my sort of being brought up in the movement, that was when the Fairness Campaign never did something without the Kentucky Alliance and without Jobs with Justice, that they did that because before that, when the Bradens were persecuted for their anti-racism work, that was tied to anti-communism and to an economic, how are racism and the economics and capitalism connected? And so that work continues. And I've been out of this work for several years now, but I see that in the work that happens here. And so I'm so glad that we have this beautiful panel with you today. And so the very last thing that I'm just going to say, because I don't know about you all, but we say social justice since 2020, but 2020 to me feels like that was yesterday. And yet so much has happened, right? Hood to the Holler, we have been founded. Jeff is the Hood to the Holler organizer, and will tell his story, but a lot of that started in 2020, and the fact that the movement has birthed an organizer in that time that to me seems like it's been 5 seconds, I think is really beautiful. And so as I just want to assume that everybody knows that in 2020 what happened in Louisville was the killing of Breonna Taylor, and I just want to acknowledge for those of you who may be coming to this space at different parts of your journey that we all have a name that we say, right? So we've heard say her name, say Breonna Taylor's name, don't forget it. And we all have a name that got us into this work. So I personally want to acknowledge the name Michael Newby in the room as one of my names from years ago. And with that, I'm also supposed to have my reminder. But I hope that our panelists, that this is a raw and honest conversation, and I hope that it challenges you. I hope that it is a conversation that is hard to hear And so saying that if there is a moment where something is hard for you to hear and hard to process it, we do want to give you space. There is the music library just right down the hallway that we have reserved as a quiet space. There's some comfy seating in there for folks. So please, if you need a moment, there's water, there's a bathroom and the quiet room. If you need a moment, please just excuse yourself and reflect on why it was hard to hear the things that you did. So I'm going to turn it over to Ramona. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And thank you, Rux, for bringing us together for this conversation. I don't know the protocol, but do we have to have the mask on while we're up here with this panel? Take it off. Okay, thank you. Thank you, because I couldn't breathe. And you want me to talk. My name is Ramona Dallum. I'm the Vice President of Equity and Impact at the Community Foundation of Louisville. And at the Community Foundation of Louisville, we believe that we are here to mobilize people, networks, assets, to spark meaningful and measurable progress for all, with a vision towards a Louisville where there's racial equity and opportunity for all of us, regardless. So I'm glad that we had the opportunity to help sponsor this conversation. We also are a sponsor for Louisville Public Media because we see them as a media outlet who is telling real, honest stories that are trying to bring people together and look at our community through a racial equity lens. And so I'm glad that we are here today to have this conversation. And as we start, I have asked all of our panelists to introduce themselves, their name of their organization, and this was a huge challenge, but I want to see what they came up with. And 10 words or less. Why is the movement for Black lives real for you, for each of them? And we'll get into that conversation deeper as we go on. So I'm just going to start here and go around.
Okay. My name is Robert Lavertis Bell. I am a public school teacher, father, a longtime organizer in the city. I've been organizing in the city and elsewhere for going on 25 years, so that dates me. I'm actually 42 years old. I had to deal with that a couple of times a day. I mostly organize these days. I wear several hats. I work at a Get Up Louisville, working on trying to get municipal public pre-K in the city of Louisville. But most of my organizing in this, in the world, comes through my involvement in the Democratic Socialists of America. I'm the former chair of the Louisville chapter of 450 members. Of course, our national organization is a democratic organization, fully democratic organization of 100,000 members, give or take, committed socialists who are trying our best to fight climate change, to marry the political interests of the working class with a movement towards building a better life for all throughout the world. So former co-chair of our local chapter, and to your prompt, why is the movement of Black lives real to me? All right, I got 10 words. I think I got 9. All right. White supremacy persists. White supremacy exists. Existing institutions are insufficient when not complicit.
All right. Thank you, Robert.
Hey, everybody. My name is Tala, or Talisha Wilson, she, her, hers. I wear many hats, like many of us who are up here. I am a community organizer. I'm born and raised in Louisville, West End Louisville, to be specific. I started organizing in 2010, right in high school, so roughly about 10, 12 years. And I also am a content creator around lifestyle and beauty and fashion, and I'm the director of community engagement for Change Today, Change Tomorrow. We're a local Black women-led nonprofit organization that provides direct services for marginalized communities, specifically people in the West End. And I'm the founder of Diversity at the Table, which is a community organization that focuses on gender, race, class, and sexuality, and how all those things relate to each other and the things that we experience. Just a whole lot of stuff that I do that we don't have time for. For me, it is important, this movement, because I want to be alive. I actually want to enjoy the fruits of my labor.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
All right. Let me get it together. My name is Shamika Parrish Wright. I don't know where to start with my titles, but I wear many hats. I did just run for mayor and came in second amongst 11 men. I am now the state director for Vocal Kentucky. We are the first state expansion branch out of Vocal New York, which means voices of community activists and leaders. So lifting up those voices, and I plan to lift up every voice in Kentucky. Since I moved, I'm a transplant. I moved to Louisville when I was 25, but I started organizing in the early 90s around Hope 6, the negative impacts of that, housing issues. I've been someone who's been chronically houseless, who's dealt with a lot of the issues that Kentuckians deal with every day. So excited to be here. I just left my role with the Bail Project as the partnerships and advocacy manager so that I can focus solely on Kentucky and bridging the gap between rural and urban divide, which is why I worked for KFTC, is why I worked for Kentucky Ties with Justice, is why I worked for the Kentucky Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression. Every position I have had in this city has been about improving the lives of Kentuckians and making sure that we lift up the voices. We are a powerful state, and our voices have been taken from us, and I want to do something about it. So I take on a lot of projects and campaigns. We're going to have a real conversation. I jump off the porch. You make it make sense. You got me. And so I say yes way more times than I need to, but I'm here. So my 10 words are: Kentucky needs social justice. Reducing red tape, it has to be our priority. Thank you.
One title Shamika left out is the boss, which is what we all call her. My name is Courtney Preston Kellner, and I feel much less qualified than everyone else sitting up here. I'm just a lawyer, but I am a rural-urban exchange. I'm from Greenup County, Kentucky, originally in eastern Kentucky, and I have been in Louisville for a really long time. I spent 3.5 years as a public defender representing kids, everything from truancy to murder, and then after that work, I opened up my own private practice where I've been in for about almost 9 years, which is crazy to think about. I'm a mother of a JCPS child, but I think I'm up here today because in May of 2020, Shamika called and asked. I told you she's the boss, and she said, we need lawyers. And so after that call, that next weekend, we showed up at arraignment court. There were 125 protesters, I think, on that day. We got them all out. And after that, we knew that it was more than the handful of us could figure out. So we started asking for volunteers, and that core group at the beginning ended up getting 112 volunteer lawyers from every sort of specialty. Not everybody's a criminal lawyer. We had environmental lawyers, corporate lawyers, everybody. And we ended up representing over 600 of the 1,000 protesters who were arrested. So we are still engaged in that litigation, set to go to trial on the first one for me, December 1st. So, and the question, it may be 11 words. I offered to donate my words to Shamika. But guys, I'm tired of working in a legal system that doesn't value Black lives.
That's right. That's right.
How y'all doing? My name is Jeff Compton. I'm from Louisville, Kentucky. I'm an activist first, and I'm an organizer second. I just got in this work in 2020. I do work for Hood to the Holler. I was on the campaign with Shamika. I can proudly say that we did clear 18,492 votes, and this was my first campaign I have ever worked with and been on, and that is amazing. And why I'm doing this is because I want to see what America looks like with true equality. And what does true equality look like for all of us?
Thank you. And since I put it out for you, I'll share mine. It matters to me because I want people to recognize and respect my humanity. That's right. And that doesn't happen for all of us every day. I know you all have the questions. I'm going to try to stick with those questions. If you don't, this is really a conversation. I don't remember the questions. I don't remember them either, Shamika. That's why I got my phone out. But we're going to have, I hope, a conversation. So we don't have to go around the circle. We can just bubble in, pop in. If when you feel moved. But this first question is related to justice. And this week, we had a win after 847 days with indictments against 4 officers. And I was at first jubilant. You know, I was like, this is good. And then I read what the indictments were. And I was like, these are indictments against not following the system appropriately. These are not indictments around respecting and honoring Black lives. This has nothing to do with Breonna Taylor as a Black woman who was shot down and killed in her home by people who weren't even supposed to be there because they lied to get into their door. So the indictments are more about the lie, not the killing. So thinking about that, I know justice means various things to various people. But in your opinion, what do you think we need to see, hear, experience in Kentucky for us to realize justice for Black lives?
Okay, I'll start. First of all, we have to recognize that justice comes in many forms. I've been saying to people that arc that our ancestors, our great civil rights leaders talked about, that bends towards justice, is really stuck in the middle. I hate that it took Breonna's life to bring us here to this point. But there's a lot of Breonnas, there's a lot of unsung people who will never be able to see that justice for. So we have to accept the smaller wins, the wins. I had a meeting with Mayor Fisher the same day. I thought he would cancel, but he didn't. But the same day that that came down, and he said, this is a big win. But for us that's been out here for a long time, and our people before us across our state, it is it's not big enough, but it's something that we could celebrate together. So for justice for Black lives, when I was thinking about my 10 words, the only path forward for us in Kentucky is collective, and that with the leadership of Black and marginalized people. That is the only path forward. After the redlining, after all the issues we deal with poverty, we've trusted rich white men for over 400 years to get shit right, and they're not getting it right. I'm sorry, fine. I'm not supposed to curse. I'm not running again. So I'm not running right now. I can say that. But I want to, honor FCC rules. But so we have to work together, and it has to be collective, and we have to know when to stand up with each other. So I think that our path forward has to be intentional, it has to be inclusive, and people have to step back and let Black, marginalized, and directly impacted people lead. We do it our whole lives. We do it every day. We wake up. We make decisions that make our community safer, our family safe, our workplace safe. We're ready for that leadership. And that's why I spent the most of my campaign trying to show people that, yes, a Black leader could look like me. People had to see it. And the people who didn't think that we can win, they didn't see it in themselves. So they couldn't vote for me because they wanted to do the same old thing because that's all they've seen. So we all have to be intentional in all our roles. And Black people cannot be racist, but we can be privileged. We can get comfortable. And none of us should be comfortable right now. As soon as those indictments came down, I pick up my phone and Brittany Griner received 9 years in a Russian prison. I think about all the other people who are fighting injustices across our nation. So all eyes are on Kentucky, and Kentucky is ready, but we must stand together to show that we're ready for the real Black liberation movement, because that's all Black Lives Matter is a continuation of the Black liberation movement that started many moons ago. So I'm ready, and I'm ready to get you engaged too.
I want to say, I just want to repeat what she said. She said that justice comes in all types of forms, right? And yes, we was outside screaming, arrest the cops. Yes, they actually arrested the cops. But like she just said, they didn't indict the cops for killing a Black female, right? But they did acknowledge that they were wrong for trespassing this Black woman's house, which was presidential in my opinion, because they made it clear that these officers cannot just go inside of anyone's home and just kill anyone, right? But what I will say, for me and my perspective, like Shamika said, justice comes in every form. Now, what we do know is that everybody was a part of this murder. We know that the mayor was a part of it. We know that the police chief at that time was a part of it. We know that the judge was a part of it at that time. And we also know that Joshua James, David Mattingly, so on and so forth. We know that all of them were involved. So what justice looks like for us as a community is not only get them arrested, because they were arrested yesterday, but we want to see them indicted. We also want to see them go to prison. Why? Because they went inside of a sleeping woman's home and killed her, right? That is what justice really looks like. And secondly, because like we was having a conversation, yes, Tamika Palmer did get a hefty settlement, but that was a settlement for her. But that was not what the community needed, because what I'm learning in these movements is, yes, you're gonna have two different justices, and that is a form of justice. But like I said, to get true justice, we got to make sure everybody that was around them, that made sure that Kentucky did not prosecute them, but the federal government had to do it. So everybody that is in Kentucky that had a chance to say that her rights were violated from them going into her home, that would, justice for me, would see all of them either get arrested and start losing their jobs, especially Daniel Cameron, because it's important that we say this, because he is what we call a token. And he tokenized himself to look like us, but still have the agenda of somebody who doesn't even value him or even care about him. So to answer your question, to see Daniel Cameron disbarred and denied access to any political official again.
All right, thank you.
Nice. I think for me, justice looks, again, totally different. I'm just mirroring what everyone has already said. But mine is a little bit more like, white people need to get real uncomfortable. I need your money. I need your property. I need you to be sponsoring Black people and Black children to get firearm training. I need you to be giving up your resources, the resources that are not yours, the resources that were stolen from somebody's ancestors, whether you directly know them or they are in your line of ancestry. You know, everyone has benefited from the labor of Black people, and in my 30th year of life, it's all about us being able to enjoy ourselves and actually like smile and be happy and live this soft and loving and, you know, very fulfilling life that we are not always given. It's about being able to be in spaces that used to be white dominated, but it was still built by black people. And so mine is about white people opening up their pockets to give us the money to do what we already do. Just like Shamika said, black people and specifically black women have always survived off of getting it done. You know, if I have $100 in my pocket and I have bills due and it is $500, I'm telling you that by the end of the day, $500 of my bills will be due. Will be paid. And so give us the money. Justice looks like coming out of your pockets, coming off of your homes, coming out of your businesses and giving them to the people who already have been taking care of everybody because we have not been given no other choice but to. We don't know how to take care of people because we want to. We know how to take care of the world because we have literally only been given that choice to take care of everybody other than ourselves. And so really when you don't put us in the front, when you don't give us your money, when you don't give us your homes and your businesses and your property, you're really doing yourself and everyone who you say you love a disservice. So justice looks like running that money.
And can I say one point to what Talisha just said? And it's important that it happens because white people have unlimited resources. Our resources are very limited. And it showed us in a campaign when we only raised this amount of money because black people, honestly, have a hard time donating. So white people have to start giving up their resources so that we can see a better world. Like, she is absolutely right. They have to start rendering our resources.
So thank you for everyone for your answers here. So I like to zoom out when we talk about these sorts of things. Police violence is part of the fabric of our society, right? It happens every single day. Police violence ends in murder, happens every single day. Sometimes when that police violence results in an actual death, a murder based on lies even, those things are criminal and they should be prosecuted more often than they are. So that this particular case ended in an indictment or several indictments is arrest at least, is a good thing, and we should celebrate that to some degree. But we should also always recognize, and I think that there's been some intentional sort of misdirection on honestly when it comes to the way we talk about this. But police violence is itself an epiphenomenon. Okay, it is not the cause of the misery that Black people experience. It is not the cause of the divestment and the disengagement and the disenfranchisement, et cetera. It is actually secondary to that. What causes that? What causes the disenfranchisement? What causes the disinvestment is, a legacy of white supremacy, a legacy of extraction from communities, extraction from people's bodies into the development of wealth and power for others. That is simply just how our world works. And so when you ask me, what does justice look like? Well, sure. On some level, it looks like prosecuting people for the crimes they commit, even if those people happen to be committing crimes on behalf of the state, obviously. But ultimately, it looks like restructuring, re-envisioning what it actually looks like to live and be a person in this country, in this society in which we live. So, when we talked, people, somebody decided it was bad branding or whatever. But when we talked about defunding the police a couple years ago, and everyone said, oh, that's whatever, unrealistic or whatever. Well, if it's unrealistic, then we need to make it realistic, because the fact of the matter is, the actual cause of this misery is the not misallocation, the actual intentional appropriation of the resources of our society toward the benefit of the ruling elite. And so when we say defund the police, we mean specifically take some of those funds away from the institution of policing, which is overfunded, over-militarized, and place them back into our communities. So justice looks like people feeling engaged in their communities, engaged in their society, feeling like they have a stake in it, their basic needs are met, and they have the opportunities to enjoy themselves in the process. They need bread, they need roses, as we say in my community. So.
Exactly.
So yes, come up off those resources like Tala said, but this needs to be institutional. It's not voluntary. Okay, voluntary, giving money from one person to the other, or asking rich people to give money to this project or that project. That's not a pathway to justice. It's a pathway to enriching a few people and making some people feel good about themselves. But we actually need broad institutional changes in our society. We need to elect new people. We need to actually re-envision our democracy and actually make it a democracy. And so that's what justice looks like. Ending these extremely powerful anti-democratic institutions, including the U.S. Senate, including the Electoral College, and reinvesting our societal resources into the people at large. That's the answer.
Jenny, do you want to add to that?
I'll just add really quickly, although...
Courtney.
Yes, Courtney.
I don't know where I got Jenny from.
Oh, it's fine. I'm the middle kid. I'll answer to anything. It's my lot in life. So for me, justice looks like changing those institutional systems that quit working for us a long time ago and acknowledging that it's a white person and a white community's problem too. And there are real tangible things that we can do that would have made a difference, that would have saved Breonna Taylor's life and so many other Black communities' lives. Reforming our search warrant process so the police don't have to have or don't get to have one-on-one conversations with judges that aren't recorded, right? Like, if somebody had been paying attention, maybe we could have saved her just by stopping the stroke of Mary Shaw's pen, right?
That's right.
Doing things like eliminating cash bail, which is what she's been working for years to do, because we know that, we're breaking up families by holding people on small bails, and people are losing their kids, and it just ends up in this institutional poverty thing where people can't work, and then they lose their kids, and we're breaking up families. There are real things that the justice system can do, and those are just some tangible ones. And what I need for my community to do is to look and see that their vote really matters, particularly when it comes to, in my view, to judges. Don't just go in and because you see someone that your sister went to Catholic high school with, don't vote for that person unless you know who that person is. I promise the high school does not matter. Okay? But look and see who these people are on your ballot. Just because they're a woman, okay, does not mean that they're carrying water for you, okay? There are people on your ballot who don't value Black lives in the court system, okay? And so do your research and actually vote for people who are qualified for those positions so we can make those changes so that Breonna's death and everyone else's death at the hands of police violence really make a difference.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. You all said some things that really sparked some thoughts in me, and kind of it relates to the second question. But Robert, you talked about the ruling elite, and Tala, you talked about give up your stuff, and the ruling elite, some media outlets, many politicians have used Tala's words of they want us to give everything that we've gotten to Black people, and we got to stop that. No, I'm telling you, but that's what they say, right? That's what they say, right? But when you look at our history, and I was telling Stephen when I came in, I was listening to Throughline, and they were talking about the 1619 Project. And as you research further, there's even evidence during the American Revolution, historically, that a lot of that was also rooted in Black liberation. So when you talk about Black liberation going back hundreds and hundreds of years, it's all the way to the founding of this country. But one of the tactics of the ruling elite was to divide whites, Blacks, indigenous people who were beginning to galvanize and come together, as Shamika said, to create systems that would also give them opportunities to thrive within this country. But the ruling elite stopped those things through what you said, our justice system, our policies, our procedures. So my next question is, with all that in mind, and knowing that the movement for Black Lives in 2020 was primarily led and organized by Black people, we have many people from our rural communities here today. They have very small Black populations. But I bet if you talk to anybody in Eastern Kentucky right now who's dealing with their home no longer existing, not having insurance to replace that, not having the basic minimal resources to thrive, they may not see themselves in this movement.
Right.
So how do you make that connection? What is that bridge? Why should they even care about Black lives?
Well, here's what I'll say to that. Look, well, that's why I was talking about extraction the other day. All right, a few minutes ago, talk about extraction. Look, there's few communities in this country at least that can speak more to the legacy of extraction, disenfranchisement, and impoverishment of the people than people in Appalachia. That's just true. You look at this our entire energy infrastructure built on their backs, built in their communities, and seeing what they have to show for it. Well, one of the things I have to show for it is climate change, which we're going to they're going to be among the primary victims of as time goes on. So when I talk about this sort of thing, I talk about a multiracial working class, because the working class is multiracial. Okay, it includes Black people here, it includes people in Eastern Kentucky, it includes white people here, and we have common interests. One of those, the main common interest we have is that experience of being our work, our land, our homes, being fodder for someone else's enrichment. And where I always say this, I've been all over the state, all over this country, talked to people all over the place, and where people have the choice of solidarity with other people, they generally tend to take it. I remember I'm a teacher and involved in the teacher movement, the labor union, and the Red for Red stuff that was happening a few years ago. One of the ways in which the House Senate Republicans and Democrats, or House Senate Republicans and representatives tried to divide the teacher movement was by telling teachers from Eastern Kentucky, when they were specifically targeting Louisville and Lexington schools, saying, why do you care about what these particular people are dealing with? These aren't your people. These are people in these cities. They're people in Lexington or whatever. And first off, the people, our teacher comrades, in these other unions said, look, what you're doing to them, you can't do to us, and we are not crossing that line. And that's one of the reasons why we were able to have this sort of statewide movement, is because we understood that we had a common interest and we have common enemies. And I think that the more we tell people that, the more that we act on that reality, and stop just BS, hillbillies here or whatever you want to call people there, that sort of mindset, and acting like we have actually more in common with the people who are, extracting from us here than we do with the people who are being extracted from there, then that's going to continue. These divides are going to continue. But as long as we, act otherwise and know otherwise, things will improve and we'll find solidarity.
Can you ask your question again?
I said, why should rural white people in general, even care about the movement for Black lives? Why?
Those dealing with poverty too.
Mm-hmm. I think that something that I know I struggle with is people understanding intersectionality, having that clear understanding of like what is actually happening in front of us. Right now, a lot of people are only able to see like race. They're only able to see like, I'm a white person who is also poor and lacks resources, and my life is a struggle as well. And it's very hard to get poor white people to understand that like your issues are class issues, not race issues, and those are different, and they both need to be fought. Just like you said, like we still have to all fight together. But if you could just understand the intersectionality exists within all of us, that you have issues and problems, I have issues and problems that look different from each other, but if we work together, we can fight against what is working against, we can fight what is working against us all. That is very hard for people to understand, because people don't like to say that they have privilege. They don't like to own that they too are benefiting from something that others are not. And so I think that's what needs to be understood. People don't understand like the basis of intersectionality, the basis of what heteronormativity is. I'm a queer woman, but I always tell people that I benefit from heteronormativity. And so when I go into the world, I am getting heterosexual privileges, because the world does not see me as a lesbian. The world sees me, until I just told y'all just made the assumption that I was a person who dated men. Well, until I say that, until I make that clear, you're not gonna know. And so I still benefit from being a heterosexual, even though I'm not. But for a lot of maybe lesbian people, that might be hard to understand. How is it that I'm benefiting from being heterosexual when I'm not heterosexual? Because this is the way that the world perceives you, and they're treating you the way they perceive you. Jesus, and of course it ain't no Jesus, because people get to, what I'm saying, because people get to, not understand, but like we really have to have a clear definition and understanding of intersectionality in order to know how not every individual, but groups of individuals exist in the world, and why they're treated that way based on that existence.
I love when we're together, because she can focus on why she does this work and why she's so passionate. And she spent a great deal of 2020, 2021, and even before then, training people who stood up or stood out before. And I really appreciate it. I want to commend you on that, because, they just thought we were all running around. They didn't know that we were like having training sessions. We were pulling people out who wanted it. Some people are always going to have their fist in the air and beat on the wall, but some of us went more strategic, and I really thank you for that, Tala. And I also want to thank one of my sons. I think you are the second black male teacher my son James had, Robert Bell, who is a deep ally, who is a strategist, and helps me understand my role. So what I've been doing and how I see it, and as they both spoke so well about the way that they approach the work, I'm overwhelmed by racism. I'm overwhelmed by all of this. I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio. I grew up, even when I was homeless, with poor white people that my family called friends, that we went over their house. I had a best friend. Her name was Amy, and she was white. Now, and when I was home in our family dinners, they say, Shamika, you always run around with those white people. But I always just accepted people who came to me as for who they are. And it wasn't until I took Ann Braden's class. So you got to think, 26 years old, that I started realizing the impact of even those relationships. And gave us an assignment to write a paper about your first experience with racism. And all of my hurt and pain up to that point, I was thinking about my sexual assault, my abuse, my rape, all of the things that I've been through were black people who perpetuated that against me. And so I just was like, who's coming in front of me and what are they doing to me? And when I had to think about this assignment, I thought about the time that I went. So Amy was my best friend. Her sister was someone who dated a lot of black guys in the neighborhood, and people just made up rumors, or I don't know if they were true, but I just refused to accept that, because I'm a read a book for myself person. I went to go get Amy to run around like we did. We did Rent-A-Kids. We did a bunch of stuff. She wasn't there. Her sister was there. And she said, why don't you go to the store with me? I don't know if they ever had one in Louisville, but they have a J.J. Newberry's that was downtown in Cincinnati. And we caught the metro down to the J.J. Newberry's. Back then, I had my Malcolm X medallion. That's when we were wearing the medallions and the red, black, and green bags. And just before junior high, right at junior high. So when we were on our way into the store, she said, Shamika, let me use your bag. And I said, oh, yeah, you can use my bag. Give her my bag. I go and get the things that I'm getting. We check out. I pay. She comes from upstairs, get ready to leave, and now a police officer has grabbed me, a store manager, a store clerk, and we're down, and they take us downstairs in the basement, and there's just no the room, and they pour the stuff out of my Malcolm X bag onto the table, but these are the things she had stolen and put in the bag. They look at her, they look at me, and they said, I know you made her steal this. And I'm looking at her, she never speaks up. She never says anything. And I said, this is not my stuff. Some people follow me, so I don't want to say her name. I said, tell them that this is your stuff. And she would not say it was her stuff. And then we get in a police car, and I did punch her, because back then I was angry. And I was going to juvenile. And my mama was going to leave me there because she told me about hanging with them white people. So I get there, she immediately gets out, and I'm sitting there. And I'm like, my mom, like, I'll see you when you got to be in front of the judge. I told you. And then later on, so I'm writing this paper with Ann's class, and I said, the store clerk was white, the police officer was white, the store manager, the people who arrested us, everybody was white. And at that moment, she chose to use her white privilege to get out of that situation. I was taken away. I was blown away by that. And so when I got in my 20s and I started doing organizing work, I was overwhelmed by all the racist things that were happening. But I said, where am I good at? What can I use my energy for? And I decided to work on poverty, because poverty is what I saw as a place where intersectionality, where you can do something about it in your lifetimes. We could leave out of this door and go impact somebody's life with what we have right now. And I decided that that's what I wanted to do. No, but that means I still honor Black leadership. That means I still did my part. I still show up for the Black movement. But everything that I focused on was about dismantling the impacts of poverty. And that's how I choose to use my time. I'm 45 years old, 6 kids, 3 grandkids. And I would not be here if it wasn't for me wanting better for everyone around me. And I think, like Robert was saying, there's more people who want to be on the good side of history, but they don't know the way. They don't have the directions. And if they just follow our society, they're really screwed. Right. So we have to have organizers and community people who are willing to take action, who are willing to be vulnerable. And that's why I'm so honored to be on this panel for Rux. Because my whole thing and why I fell in love with Kentuckians for the Commonwealth, they were doing flyovers. They were taking people from Eastern and Western Kentucky and bringing them here to tell us about what their living situations was. And then they were bringing people from Louisville and urban cities and fly them over so they can see that we have more in common. It just looked differently because of climate change, because of region, but we're still fighting the same enemies. Right. So I agree with Tala. Some of us are going to work on ending these racist practices in that way. And some of us have to work on dismantling poverty and all the things that are connected to it. That doesn't mean that we're not powerful together. We all know, and I recognize the work she did and everyone on this panel did. And I chose to work on issues that directly impact more of the people that we see across Kentucky. Thank you.
Can I just, hands, who's from Eastern Kentucky? Okay, hi. We might be related. So I grew up in one of these towns, one of these Appalachian towns where we were white, right? There weren't any people who didn't look like me. And I am the first generation of my family not to grow up in poverty. I'm a coal miner's granddaughter. I won't sing Loretta Lynn. And so I grew up with parents who knew what it was like not to have a lot, and they worked really hard, and their parents also worked really hard so they could go to college and eventually professional school and raise children who had opportunities that they didn't have. And when I saw this question in your email, I thought, oh no, this one's the one for me as an Appalachian in Louisville in the movement. I think there are lots of reasons to invest in the kind of, I'm going to use the term anti-racism education in those communities. When there are minorities in those communities, there's just not a lot. And we want to make sure that we're creating communities where those people have the same opportunities as people who look like me, have the same, they feel safe in those communities, because that's not always, that's a rarity. And we want to make sure that we're educating that community to provide that to our Black community members in rural areas. Also, there's a a chance for leadership in those people, so that they can acknowledge the intersection of that struggle with the struggle of Black communities and other minority communities. And that's why I love the work that Elizabeth and her organization are doing wherever you are, because, and Jeff, of course, because it took 2020, and I think of 2020 to today as just a time where I sat and learned and listened, and I didn't do that in the ways that I've done in the last 2.5 years because you taught me that. And I learned that there was a lot of intersection. And gosh, we have felt like disposable people in Appalachia for so long and so exploited. And there's a lot of commonality with the Black community in that. And gosh, what power there could be if we could harness it and work together.
That's right. Thank you, Courtney.
Yeah. I'll just say this. What we do know is history tends to repeat itself, especially in America. So we do know that Martin Luther King had the Poor People's Campaign, and he made it clear that it was not just for Black people, but it was for poor people. And then we also know that the Black Panthers also created the Rainbow Coalition. Right. So we do know that everybody's been oppressed, but unfortunately, we do know that Black people have felt the brunt of being oppressed, right? But what we do also know is how parallel our stories can be sometimes. Just because where I live might be considered the ghetto to someone, but like she said, she's from Appalachia, not knowing that Appalachia looks just like where I live. But just because this person lives in Appalachia, they believe that they're not in danger of being oppressed, if that makes any sense. And that's what I thought was cool about both of those movements, the Poor People's Campaign and the Rainbow Coalition, because they made sure to show people it doesn't matter where you live, it doesn't matter what color you are, but it actually matters about the people that are making the decisions for us. And oftentimes, and what we've seen in 2019 and before that, we've seen a president making some people feel like they were not oppressed, making some people feel like it's not us. We just gonna keep working hands and bones to the needle and still come home broke. Right. And thinking that is okay when that is not okay. Nobody should be working skin and bones to come home and still be struggling.
Thank you. I need a time check. But I don't know how long we had in the beginning. I don't know. Well, are we supposed to go to, was it 45 minutes for the panel and then speed dating? Is that right? So we got 1 minute? Is that what you're saying, Amelia? If you tell me to do what I want, I'm gonna keep on talking.
That's right. Let's do it.
Okay. All right. So this is I think the final question, and then I want to wrap up. I want to read a passage from Audre Lorde to close. Okay. So the last question: how do you keep the movement alive now? What's next? And what should be the biggest priorities, not just for Black lives, but across Kentucky, from the hood to the holler? What should be our biggest priorities if we're gonna rebirth the Poor People's Campaign, the Rainbow Coalition, because I see the hood to the holler as a rebirth of those. So what's next, and what's our biggest priorities?
I want to say something about Hood to the Holler real quick, and that is what's most important about Hood to the Holler. That's why it's called Hood to the Holler, because our problems are aligning. But that's all I just want to reiterate. That's why it's important that it's called Hood to the Holler, so that everybody knows that they are not forgotten about. But what I will say is, everybody in this room, I'm pretty sure everybody in this room has some type of social media. You have some friend, you have a family member, you have a relative. I would just say start the conversation. The conversation may get rough, it may be interesting, but conversation rules the nation. And if you see something that you don't feel right about, share it. Because what happened in Louisville, we made sure we shared each other's posts. We made sure we shared each other's information. My therapist said, well, Jeff, how do you get so much information? Well, because I'm in a community of people who feed me information. So what I do with that information is I share that information so that we can make sure we are pushing the needle so that these elected officials can give us exactly what we need.
Okay. So I think you asked something about like how do we keep the movement going, and base building is, anybody who does anything with campaigns knows that base building is like the hardest thing ever.
What is base
So
building?
base building is you building your base up for whatever campaign or whatever type of thing you're trying to do. So I'm an activist and an organizer. So my base is my communities of which I exist are in relation with. So my community is Black people. How do I build my base of Black people? I got to figure out where they're at. I got to figure out when they're there, and I have to go there, and I have to figure out what the message is going to be. And you have to do that over and over and over again, because me just going to someone's house and canvassing and knocking on a person's house one time is not going to do it. So we got to send them multiple communications. We got to come into their spaces. We have to do a lot of stuff. Basically, it's a lot of physical and mental labor, and so that's why it's one of the hardest things to do, but it's so necessary to build your base, because once you have your base, you all can move and push work together. Right. At one point during I'm probably selling myself short, but I'm saying that I did over 175 trainings between 2020 and now, and direct action trainings, and was able to execute from those trainings really large actions such as fire, gentrifier, and Nulu, from those spaces. And something that has to happen is people have to know why they're there. What I spent a lot of time in, and I tell people why that space was so important and will continue to be so important, is because we're not walking into that space and immediately getting to the work. First of all, I don't even know you, and I have to trust you in order to move work with you, right? This is life or death work. Right. And so I have to trust that I can put my life in your hands when we go out here in these streets. And so I need to gauge your self-interest. What are you doing here? Why are you here? Because everyone has self-interest. My self-interest is for white people to fund my life because I deserve, so I can live a soft, luxurious life, be in Bali somewhere having a good time. You know what I'm saying? But we need to know what our self-interests are. My self-interest might be to empower other people so that they can step into their power. That is important. Yeah. And so I think that that's how it is about building momentum, getting people there. And you have to spend a lot of time talking about taking care of yourself. Not just self-care, because here recently self-care has been this luxurious thing where, everyone doesn't have access to go out of town at the end of the week when they are having a stressful week. But everyone does need to take care of themselves in some type of capacity. So what I taught people is that stop practicing self-care on the weekends and on Mondays and on Fridays and in the new year. No, practice self-care every single day in your life. Anytime that you feel like it, if right now in this moment I needed to take a break and go outside, I'm going to do that. Or if I felt like I wanted to go drink some coffee in the middle of this panel discussion, I'm going to go do it. I don't feel guilty about it. I don't feel bad about it. I'm going to take care of myself in whatever capacity and not wait on it for this one significant time. So making sure to take care of yourself is how you build momentum, because if you don't, then people get stressed out. And we saw that in 2020 where people did not even know that they were so overwhelmed, but they kept going and kept going and kept going until they ran out. And then we didn't have nobody on the streets anymore. And then lastly, what's next is, and I'm not going to tell y'all too much about this because I don't know y'all like that. But I dealt with a whole lot of trauma from 2020 and 2021, being in specific spaces where I was being emotionally abused, financially abused. I was put in harm's way, and with people who I thought that I was organizing with in a safe way. And so from that, I started, getting mad at people like, how y'all still supporting these people? How y'all still supporting these organizations? And what I had to realize is that I cannot tell someone to stop shopping at Walmart if they go there to get their deodorant for $2 if I'm not providing somewhere else that they can get their deodorant for $2. And so if I'm telling people to stop being a part of this space because it's harmful and it's abusive, then what am I providing to the folks who depend on this space in order to get acclimated into movement work? And so I've been working on this project for about 9 months now, and now I'm creating a focus group of Black people to give me more perspective, because my perspective is very much in my lens and with my privilege, and I don't have no kids, so I'm not considering certain things as it pertains to the development of this program. But I am developing a program to get people acclimated into movement work and abolition work, because what we didn't do in 2020 and what we should have did was grab some of those people who were outside, and we should have pulled them into our spaces and gave them the resources that have been gate kept for so long, and we didn't do that. And we should have. So now I'm developing that program. And so for those who are out here, if y'all want to know more about that, please ask me. And that's what's next for me. Oh, and also what's next is I'll tell y'all later, because I just done got a mind done.
Thank you.
You go ahead.
Oh, you sure? Okay. So 2020 protest work isn't over for any of us. For me, that looks like trials. So I told you that, there were over 1,000 arrests. Our little conglomerate of, I don't know, whatever we are. We have had, I think at best guess, probably 75% of those cases dismissed or resolved in some way. So that's a really big deal. But we got to try some of these cases. The new Lou action.
Yeah, I'm still fighting my case.
Well, she's a co-defendant on a case I'm working on. So we're going to go to trial, but what I hope comes next for us, especially in light of what occurred Thursday with the indictments, is a phone call telling me they're dismissing the rest of the charges. Because that needed to happen a long time ago. It happened when we were in court with Shamika a long time ago. But there's a lot of people still fighting this and fighting to clear their own records because the cause is just and the cause is right. And so coming to a jury box near you, I guess I should say soon, there's going to be a whole heck of a lot of trials. I think maybe close to 50. So let's go.
Thank you. I'll go, and we can end with our amazing Black men. So for me, I do believe politics are who gets what, when, where, and how. Before I decided to run for mayor, I was actually going to work on judicial campaigns. I'm still advising some of them because judges make life decisions, and we need the right judges elected. We cannot. Everything Courtney said is true. So much nepotism runs our nepotism, and the benefit of doubt we give police and we give white nice men. White nice men will kill us in our country. We got to stop just giving them a pass because they smile or whatever it is. They got money. We have to make sure that we're being inclusive and intentional. Every Black person in here, when we came in here, we already did a head count of how many more Black people are in here. All of us do it. It's a natural thing. So I want to challenge you to do the same. Be intentional when you're in spaces, whatever you could do. I'm not saying, and I believe what Tala's saying is true. I'm not somebody to say quit your job, because I can't afford to support you if you do that. But I want you to use every position, every opportunity you have to create space to welcome people in and to make sure you're being that intersectionality we talked about. It's not just a $6 word for us. It's a word that we live, and you have to live it so that people start paying attention, that it does matter that my neighbor was accosted by the cops for no reason. Yeah. I need to speak up. I need to speak out. And when you're in these spaces and you don't see certain faces, or you know everybody's name there, then that should bother you. That should make you want to do more and to be more engaging. I wanted to make sure that I said I told you politics are everything, that we have to be collective, that we need social justice. Our state is suffering so bad, and that we need to make sure that we are lifting up every voice we can. That's what I'm trying to do with Vocal. The base building that she talked about is so important, but you can build bases. Electoral is another way to approach this work. My family knows, and I say this all the time, you can't come get turkey dinner. I cook well, but you can't come get a plate if you're not registered to vote. When my nieces and nephews come in, there's Shamika, Aunt Shamika, I'm registered, I voted. I don't really always like drill them on who they voted for as much as that they're participating in democracy, because our vote is the last power we have. It's our Jedi move, right? And so if we're not encouraging people to get to those polls and following up with people, that would be my last thing, follow up. Follow up is everything. I learned that through the campaign, through all the years of organizing. When somebody stops me and say, I got a problem, even if I can't fix it, I'm gonna connect them. So your follow up has to match. Your follow-up is everything to a person who is reaching out to you in need. Yeah. We got to make sure we're following up with our people, because that helps us build the base that we need to change our state for the good. Yeah. We have the power to do that, and we have to vote out. We have to make sure we vote better people in, and people who are not serving us well, they need to go. Thank you.
Robert?
Yeah. So when I first read that question, how do we keep the movement alive? I had the thought that maybe some of you had which is the movement alive? Yeah. Because frankly, Howard Zinn, the historian, one time he was giving a talk. He was talking about the Woolworths counter in Greensboro, and he said, this wasn't the time those students sat there wasn't the first time anyone tried to sit at a lunch counter and was, they were, turned away, sometimes usually with violence, arrest, et cetera. It wasn't the second, it wasn't the third, it might not have been the 8,000th time. So, when we think about, movements and, we have to think about, as Shamika said, the long arc of history. Now, we are simply not at the stage that we were 2 years ago, where there are a lot of people out. People feel engaged. People feel like they have a voice and they can actually do something about the conditions that we're in. We're not there, nor have the conditions actually changed much. So to that end, the movement's not alive in that way. It is perhaps dormant, and we might need another few dozen situations to get it right. And so one of the things that I think that we should be cognizant of, and a concept I think everyone in this room should be familiar with, and we'll talk about what's next, is a concept called elite capture. Is anyone familiar with that concept? Raise your hand. Okay, well, there's a great book by Olufemi Utawo, but it's a concept that's been used all over the place to describe how the powers that be, let's say, tend to use organizations, nonprofits, et cetera, in order to manage dissent and manage protest. This is something that we've experienced here locally since 2020, and something that has been historically something that has stymied the movement for Black Lives, since long before it was called that. The Ford Foundation, for instance, put hundreds of millions of dollars into managing protests after the civil rights movement in the 60s. And I think, we really have to be cognizant of the degree to which these, often well-meaning people, often well-meaning funders in these NGOs have a tendency to manage, gatekeep, and prevent us from actually building the bases that we actually need in order to make these movements, these eruptions of activity when they come around, more effective. So moving forward, we need to be considering the reality that we need more people, and not just more people. We need more people involved to feel empowered to make these decisions. In the running of their organizations, we need long-term organizations that are politically oriented, that have a distinct politics, that have independent infrastructure, that are not dependent on elite donations, that are not dependent on the charity. They're not dependent on the charity of individual wealthy people who have an outsized amount of power then in managing those movements. So this is just, how we move forward is by building these bases, building organization, bringing people in, training them, developing an orientation toward building a mass. And the homie earlier acknowledged he did the freestyle over the Gangstar classic Mass Appeal, where he said, the whole song's about how we're not chasing mass appeal. Well, actually, we should be chasing mass appeal, right? Like, we should be looking out for the masses, and we should be trying to bring as many of the masses into the movements, not grass tops, not to be leaders or employees or funded, the grant writers, but as individual people in their daily lives who are trying to make the world a better place and empowering them in that process. And that's how we can, when the next eruption happens, we're more equipped to actually make the fundamental changes that we need in our society.
People power. That's right.
I just want to say one thing. I would have to say I disagree with you. This is a movement. In fact, what I've been taught, if there are at least 3 people who are interested in something, that is considered a movement. We have shown up to the school board this week. We have shown up to Metro Council this week. This is not a dormant movement. This is a stand strong movement. In fact, we have comrades all over this country, and we are continuing to show up in these spaces where they think that we have forgotten about it.
I think. I'm sorry. I wanna add to that, and I struggle with that too, because I'm always like defending the movement, and I'm always like, wait a minute, like, we moving, but you just don't see it. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's something though that I think is important is it's very hard to see something if everything is moving. If I am a person who is observing the movement and I'm looking at what all is happening, it's really easy for me to not follow anything because everything is happening everywhere and it's not cohesive. And so it's very hard for people to focus in and think that these things is happening. Just like you said, Shamika, you might have seen everybody out there, like a lot of the rap that a lot of people got when I was on these national calls and stuff is that Louisville is just unorganized. Ain't nobody in Louisville organizing. It's like, no, they are organizing. You don't see it. Yeah. But you're not supposed to. Because it's dangerous. So why would you see, you know what I'm saying? Like, people may not know I've done all of these trainings, but you also was not supposed to know. Because I'm not trying to, you see where I am right now. We not trying to be out here telling you every single move that we're making, but I do believe, to your point, I do believe that in order for this movement to thrive and in order for those who are not involved in the movement to even feel like there is a movement to get involved in, those of us who are moving, like you said we are, because I dare somebody say, oh, ain't nothing been done. I've been working my ass off, and so you ain't gonna be able to say it here.
You know that.
No, yeah, of course. But what I will say is that those of us who are working, we do need to get on not necessarily the same page, but we do need to make sure that our values and our morals are aligned, even if our practices on how we get to where we need to get to are not necessarily aligned. We need to be cohesive, and we need to be on the same page. If we're going into these meetings with the Metro Council and we're telling them to defund the LMPD, we all at least need to be on the same page of what we want. But if we have this organization saying this in regards to defunding LMPD, and we have this organization saying this in regards to defunding LMPD, and another organization saying something different, then they're not going to listen to any of us. We're better together, like you said, people power. Once we all, if I'm doing work, you're doing work, and 7 other people in here are doing work, why are we not sitting at the table with each other and sharing things with each other? Because when we don't do that, it looks like we're not moving at all. So,
And thank you all for this very robust conversation. I know we are 5 minutes over. But I'm going to, y'all didn't get to do y'all speed dating, so sorry, we still love y'all. But
You can speed date me anytime. I'm available.
Well, I don't know. But I want to close with something about Audre Lorde. And quite often in the movement, we hear people say the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. And that's a quote from Audre Lorde. But we usually don't hear the rest of it, what the context of that. And when you think about it, Many of the tools that are used by elites have been tools that have been exploited by the working class and then manipulated against us. One of those tools is us collectively organizing and collectively building systems so we can thrive. For example, the Bail Project was a system that was created to overthrow something that was oppressing. And
the
now,
community foundation donated money and didn't put all those red tape with it. A simple form that said, here's the money, you can use it for this, show us what you did. We need more funders that are going to do that if we're going to do exactly what Robert said. Because we have the same people who are hurting us sometimes are the same people behind the foundations, and that's why what makes the organizations do what you said, and not is it defund, is it reallocate, because they want to be good, they want to save grace. So thank you for saying that.
you're very well, and I'm working behind the scenes to try to help make that shift happen. But I want to read the rest of Audre Lorde's quote, and I'm going to close with this. Survival is not an academic skill. It is learning how to stand alone, unpopular, and sometimes reviled.
That's it. That's it.
And how to make common cause with those others identified as outside the structures in order to define and seek a world in which we can all flourish. It is learning how to take our differences and make them strengths. For the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. They may allow us temporarily to beat him at his own game, but they will never enable us to bring about genuine change. And this fact is only threatening to those who still define the master's house as their only source of support.
That's word.
Yeah, that's Audre Lorde. That's the whole quote. So it's gonna take all of us.
That's right. That's right.
Thank you. All right, so I don't know what's next. I don't know if we speed dating, if we answer questions, if we ran out of time, I don't know.
So we do have a little bit of time. I'd like to use it however you all would like to use it. So
I would like to hear some of your voices. Can you answer some questions?
I have a question. I'm gonna try not to cry when I say this because everything you said has been so powerful for me as an organizer and an activist as well. I live in a smaller community, but it's a great community, but we're facing some difficult times to come. We are just beginning to dive into diversity, equity, and inclusion in a very real way. And I happen to have the privilege and yet the pain of being in the forefront, but being behind, because I don't want people to see me. I want them to see the movement. I want them to see what's happening and the change. I have a specific issue that I just need you to, I don't know if you have time to even say anything to this. There's a very amazing park that was donated to Black people in our community many years ago. They are stripping it away from us and taking it to build a $40 million baseball, soccer park, and that Black children will never have the opportunity to really have, it won't mean anything to us. That park was our place of family reunions. That park was our place of gathering and loving on one another and having whatever it is that we needed in our community. We did it in that park historically. And so anyway, now it's been stripped away from us. And what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to figure out what do I do? Because I feel like and this is no punch to our local civic organizations, but they are not doing anything. They are busy having parties and, kumbaya stuff. And I'm like, we're not being effective in any way. And our beautiful white people in our community who are trying, they don't get it. They don't understand it all. They think, oh, this is great. We're coming together. And it's like, you know what? We're not. So as a person who is trying to move that forward, what do you recommend? What is a mode of action to take when you're in that situation? Because I'm sure I'm probably not alone in terms of, what I'm facing.
Well, I don't know how much time you got because the wicked never rest. They always constantly working against us, right? But what I would say is, Tyler said it best earlier, like when you building a base, because that's what we're doing here is building a base. So start capacity building, start the conversation, start town hall meetings about it, and start to build up the capacity to it. And what I learned in organizing is it's just transactional. My boss taught me that this work is definitely transactional, right? So when planning that, we were thinking like, how can I make other people that don't care about it care about it? So, like Shamika said, well, are you my neighbor? Would you want to see your neighbor's park get tumbled over by something that we don't even need in this community? So I would say truly start with the community, start building capacity in the community and not make people, but get people to understand why it's important to you, and then you build up to something so that other people can support you. And that's what I've seen in this work is once you get other people interested, then you can definitely move the needle.
And I'm not a lawyer. That's why I hang with lawyers. I'm the queen of workaround though. So I want to see if there's any historical markers or preservation. And when you say stripping, are they taking part of it and leaving part of it? So they're trying to take like eminent domain, kind of like remove. So yeah. So for me, I always look for the workarounds. I think everything that Jeff said is true, and then get you some legal support, like people who know the laws. The strongest laws are around land. That's what we saw that even during the protests. Churches couldn't be our sanctuary. It took First Unitarian because they actually owned their land. So the strongest laws around land. So I would say let's do some homework, and I want you to stay connected. There's a lot more I can say that I'm a workaround person. I have to talk to a lawyer about first. But yeah. So yeah, let's stay in touch about that.
Yeah, I would say that for one, thank you for being transparent, because I feel like I felt that energy of like, this hurts. You know what I'm saying? And you know, we know of like being in a space and someone just stripping it away, taking it away from us. Like, you know, we know what that looks like, and we've seen that happen in our own communities. We've seen that happen at Breeway. We've seen that happen that's why Nulu even happened in the first place. Was because that's where it came from, is you literally displaced black people from here, and now you want to put your Black Lives Matter signs in your doors. Nah, you done made that up. But I think that where we need to spend a lot of time in is the feelings that's coming up for you, because there's some other people in your community who feel that same thing, and that's what's gonna drive your fire. That's what's gonna make you fight. That self-interest, that reason why is where I think the first step is for one, naming what your feelings are, like what's coming up for you and why is it coming up for you, and then finding people in your community who some of those same feelings come up for, and who share some of those same relationships with this particular place, and really getting into a space with each other and really leaning on one another for emotional support. So that is gonna build. That's gonna start that fire, and from there, because everyone is in space, we all mad. That's why caucuses are so important. You know what I'm saying? Because we're all in here experiencing these things together, and so much can come from that. But I see that you are a person who likes to take action, and I know that because I am too. But what I also learned in 2020 is that sometimes I just need to not take action right now, and I really need to feel what I'm feeling and be present with myself, because then I'm gonna find the people who gravitate to me, so that action that has to happen, it's not just me doing it, but it's us doing it. And so I think that's what has to happen first, is share space and share community with people who feel what you feel, so that y'all can think about, for one, what are we even feeling? What do we want? What is even happening? What can we do? Who is responsible? What are we feeling? What is the end goal? When do we want to get this done? And that's a part of the organizing that I love, is that we get to ask one another all of these deep emotional questions before we go out there and act.
That's great. Thank you.
Mario.
Speaking about black land dispossession, my question is for Robert. Can you talk about the West End TIF and how TIFs impact poor and working class people across Kentucky?
Mario, why don't you talk about it?
Where do we start?
Who here is familiar with the West End TIF, the WE app? Okay. So enough of you guys. TIF stands for tax increment financing. It is a mechanism used all over the country to fund public projects and sometimes private projects using what is future tax revenue. So this particular project, this particular TIF, the West End Opportunity Project Partnership. The WEOP, the West End TIF, came about last year. It was ostensibly, to some people, a response to the protests in 2020, but many of us see it as a pretty straightforward grab of resources from the West End. It basically makes a situation where 100,000 people in several neighborhoods in the West End of Louisville don't actually have any choice over where their tax money goes over the next 20-something years. So a tax increment works like this. A tax increment plan does work like this. You leave taxes at the current state that are paid to the city or the state or whatever for a certain amount of time. But your taxes, if you live in those places, still go up. It's just that what is the increment, the difference between what you are paying now and what you pay as taxes go up based on property assessments, et cetera, that increment, that bit goes to, in this case, a slush fund to be overseen by a board that includes several representatives of banks, community institutions. The University of Louisville is one of them. Simmons College is one of them. And various bankers, developers, et cetera, and along with some group of representatives of the community which they choose themselves. It was initially proposed by Bob Stivers, the Senate president, and a Republican Senate president, Kentucky State Senate president, with the collaboration of various members of the Democratic caucus, black members of the Democratic House and Senate caucus, and also some representatives of local grassroots organizations. So that's what it is. It is, like I said, a slush fund overseen by a body of developers, politicians, community institutions to determine where this tax increment revenue will be used in the West End of Louisville over the next 20-something years.
And I'll just last part. If it was in Anchorage, most of those folks are homeowners in Anchorage. But in the West End, there's a great deal of renting population who don't even know what this is, don't even know if it will benefit or not. And a lot of properties are owned. Over 60% are owned by people who do not live in the West End.
Right. And so across the country, and you could look at Chicago, which is somewhat the model of what this particular system is. The one that's happening in Louisville is, it's across the country, it's been used as a tool for extracting public resources and putting it into the pockets of developers in order to increase the developers' profits. One primary mechanism through which that happens, the increase of profits, is gentrification. So people like Muriel and other activists in the city have spoken up and have been constantly engaged in conflict with the Western Opportunity Partnership. I didn't mention this before. I ran for State House earlier this year, in part because of my opponents. Her name is Representative Pam Stevenson. She won the race, by the way. Part of her advocacy for the Western Opportunity Partnership, to me, like I said, it is a theft. It's a theft from the people of the West End. It benefits. There's a portion of wealthy black, typically black homeowners and developers in the West End who will benefit from it, but the vast majority of working class people in the West End will lose a lot over the next 20 years. It's a horrible thing. Did I say enough, Muriel? All right.
And that's why I voted for him.
Oh, thanks.
I don't exactly know how to ask this question. It's a little bit of a step back and just an observational question and a curiosity.
Just ask it.
Historically, the movement for social justice was very tied in also with faith. And as times have changed, that it seems like in the past that was something that really unified people. It gave a common language for human dignity. It gave a common language for a lot of things integral to the movement. As times have changed, people's views on faith have also changed significantly. And in many ways, it feels like that has left a hole of something that can be a unifying force. Yeah. And I'm just wondering how that hole is felt, if it's being addressed, if there's something else to fill that hole, and what effect you've noticed that has had on people trying to organize and unify behind these issues today.
I'll answer part of this, and I'm curious to see what my colleagues say. But I'm a part of Swords of Justice Network as a non-denominational Christian, and I will tell you, since even in 2020, there's been all kind of faith leaders that have reached out, and communities and churches from all over. Because I'm non-denominational, I'm very inclusive of every form of faith too. And I do agree that a lot of things have happened with the faith community, and why you have a growing number of nons, of people who don't believe, because in many ways things have failed them, and that's where they're at. But I will say that when I got tasked with the Bail Project work in 2018, the first people I took it to were people of faith. I started meeting with church groups and saying, this is your problem. This goes against everything that you've talked about. Prisons, in fact, were built and designed as a point of retribution and all of this on faith principles. And that is not what's happening. And we already know what mass incarceration has done. So I took it to them, and this is an issue of faith. Churches and church groups have been getting together, and families, and bailing out their loved ones forever. And bail hasn't been allowed to be this unchecked power that's in a system that's built with so many injustices and cracks, and it's just been unchecked for so long. And in Kentucky, we did something great when we eliminated bail bondsmen, but we didn't do away with the bail system. So the way that I was able to be successful in spreading the message about true meaningful bail reform is through faith groups. So I'm not lost on that part because of the work I had to do. So I'm thinking this as someone who hasn't had to do this work. I worked with the Presbyterian Church. Their national headquarters is here. They got engaged and they said, Shamika, we've been here over 20 years and we've never gotten involved in any local movements or local anything, and we want to be a part of this. So they took what they did in St. Louis under Stated Clerk J. Herbert Nelson, and they started doing great work, started meeting with folks, Catholic folks, folks from all over, and that was really strong. The last part I want to say is during the civil unrest due to the killing of Breonna Taylor, faith leaders showed up. They held hands. They stood the front lines. El Search Faith was there. Swords of Justice was there. Lone faith leaders were there, and they were there talking to people, providing, doing everything they could. They didn't do training like Tala was able to do, but they were able to help create some safe spaces. And I'm telling you, I was arrested trying to get to First Unitarian as a safe space, and I really commend them for standing up, because some of our black church leaders didn't offer their space, or others didn't offer their space for us to come. So I think actually in movement and organizing, whatever stage you think it is, it cannot go its furthest without the involvement of the faith community. So I make sure that I give every opportunity for faith leaders to get involved, and there are some good things that are happening. So I know what you've seen, but on the ground, we have faith folks showing up and taking action.
Can I speak really quickly to the white church, maybe? Because we have to be honest, that's a different setup. So I let's be clear. So because that's really a conviction for me. So what I didn't tell you is that I also represent a very large mainstream mainline Protestant or denomination for the whole state of Kentucky. My faith called me to be a public defender. My faith called me to this movement. And so my organizations sometimes, and I'm not speaking to my client, but the white church has failed in a lot of ways to show up in real, tangible ways. the United Methodist Church has a black bishop for the entire state of Kentucky. We marched in Justice Square together. That mattered because I think it gave his predominantly white congregants, made them feel, I'm going to say safe, but also safe in that space, but felt like they could be empowered to do something. And it took him leading that. The white church has work to do. I saw the faith communities. I helped represent Shamika after she was locked up on her way to church. Faith communities have shown up. The Buddhists have held space for us after jail deaths. They're in the square. They're there. They're helping to organize. But man, the white church could really stand to contribute their funds, their resources, the organizations that already exist, and those churches exist in your communities. There's a call to do social justice work, and they need to get on it.
Yeah, what's your name? Emily. So you, I think you made a really good point. As they've just pointed out, that lots of members, people of faith, church organizations have been, will continue to be involved in this movement work. But what you identify, though, is the reality that, in the past, particularly the movement of the 50s and 60s, church leaders, well, the main, some of the main sources of leadership came from three specific places: the black church, and particularly the black church leadership, so pastors, students, and membership-based civic organizations, including labor unions. Well, and that's why those movements, in part, why those movements were able to be as successful as they were. Well, every single one of those things I just mentioned have been in severe decline over the past 50 years. And what's replaced them, first off, to be frank, we kind of caught lightning in a bottle with the Southern Poverty, with the SPLC, with the SELC. The Southern Christian Leadership Conference. We caught lightning in the bottle. We were very lucky to have Dr. Martin Luther King exist and the people around him. But, because we haven't been able to find those people, again, who have that sort of leadership and who are not susceptible to being particularly bought off. In my experience, I'm going to be honest. In my experience, the black clergy, and clergy in general, but black clergy are the ones I'm most familiar with, the ones who are not susceptible to outright bribery, outright co-optation, who actually have any interest in perpetuating a movement for people who are not themselves and the people around them immediately, they're few and far between. At a time when church membership, church engagement is at an all-time low, pastors' wealth is at an all-time high. Tell me more about that. So these are institutions that we're actually, we have to deal with the reality. These institutions have been in decline: civic membership, churches, and student activism. So we can either try to encourage people who are in faith communities to re-engage their own faith communities and be active in that work. I believe in doing that from a bottom-up approach, not relying on pastors, because I generally believe that leaders can be developed, should be developed from the bottom up as opposed to from the top down. But also re-engaging with, reinvigorating a student movement, reinvigorating a labor movement, and, again, I keep beating the same drum, but bringing back membership-based civic organization. These are the only things that can serve as a lever of power against the significant amount of power that the ruling elites have, that when it comes to actually perpetuating and actually making these movements strong. What we have instead, as I've said before earlier today, and again I sound like a broken record, I promise to talk about other things, but what we have instead is a system of elite capture, where since we don't have these institutions that can be a countervailing force, we have the development of grass tops, NGOs, and the management of protest. That can only go so far and is extremely susceptible to co-optation. So reinvigorating these civic institutions, student activists, and yes, faith communities is extremely important.
And many groups did start. I want to be fair. Courtney reminded me when she said social justice. It should be at every church. There should be a social justice group. I will say, and I think Tala, me and you were invited. A couple of groups, and some of them were women led, started social justice groups, and we were asked to come and talk about our work. And I thought that was good. It's been so much. It's been a blur, but we've been asked to talk about our work. So I will say some have taken Courtney's notion and started their groups. I would say you could encourage your churches or your faith to do the same.
But I think also in doing that these white-led social justice groups really have to not do what they think is the best thing to do, but really listen to those in the forefront of that social justice movement, be they Black leaders, be they members of the Latina or Asian community who are also facing large oppression as well. When we're looking at these social justice movements and really looking at what it means to be an ally and a partner in the work and not co-opting the work.
That's good.
I heard it once called that white allies to the movement should consider themselves guests of the movement.
Yes.
And so you tell me where to go, I'll go do it, but it ain't my show to run.
Right.
So.
And I see that so much with philanthropy as well, that we want to tell how do you do the work? You know, this is how you should be doing it, but that's not our call to make. I think we have to be more willing to give unrestricted funding to movement type work, and that's what I'm trying to move us
She's been doing
towards.
that with the community foundation.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to lift up.
But I think more organizations need to be to. Cause you called it elite capture. We have to learn how not to do that.
That's right.
And yeah.
I just want to say it's interesting that we are talking about faith, protest, and all of that stuff because I didn't go to church for over 10 years. And in this movement, in this particular movement right now, I actually found my pastor, and he don't even live in Louisville, but he teaches justice and how spirituality are hand in hand. So what I will say is, it's still a chance out here that there are some pastors that are literally teaching their people that justice and religion, you can't get around them. They go together hand in hand. And that's it.
Right. Well, I see. Oh.
I also got very emotional because I don't think I realized how hopeless I felt. You hear this and then you're like, you see Black people talk like this, and it's just shocking. But I just wanted to thank you guys for being unapologetically Black, especially you, ma'am. You didn't change the way you talk.
That's right.
You didn't change the way you dress.
Yeah.
You're saying what we're all thinking.
Yeah.
And you just said it like that. Like I was sitting over here going through it because I was just so shocked at how unapologetically Black you are. And just thank you for being you because it gives me permission to be me. And you pointed out something. Remind me of your name.
Shamika.
Me?
Shamika?
Yes,
Okay.
Shamika. Yes.
You pointed out something that I think there are a few people in the room who probably didn't realize this happens, and I call it Count the Black People. This is our 5th day together, and until you said that, I just know there are people in this room who didn't think that to do that. Meanwhile, everywhere I go, I count the
Giving
Black
me
people.
chills.
So I just thank you for pointing that out, because this might be the first time in their life where they've ever realized everywhere we go, like we count the Black people.
Come on, sis.
So just thank you.
You giving me chills. I don't want to cry. I did not want to lose who I was, even while running for mayor. I did work on a judicial campaign with Courtney. I've worked behind the scenes, like some of you say you want to do, to help get people elected. But being out there, I had FBI at my door. I had black people against me just for no reason because they couldn't see themselves as mayor, so they couldn't see me as mayor. But my blackness is something that's very important to me. And I moved here from a city in Cincinnati that's, to me, is a lot more conservative in ways than Louisville. But I grew up with white people, but I didn't grow up saying I have to follow them. I grew up when we worked together. We loved together. We lost together. And as Elizabeth brought up, Michael Newby, when I moved here, that was part of the movement that I got involved in. But I lost my very own dear friend Sam Dubose to police violence. And so I carry around a lot of pain and hurt. And when I was younger, I was violent with it. You know, I fought. I was, and I never had to prove myself so much until I moved to Louisville. I never had nobody question my blackness until I came here. And they questioned it because white people were drawn to me. But I didn't do nothing special, no special dance for them. I just showed up and spoke exactly how I feel from my heart. But it took a long time for me to learn to articulate that. And I'm 45, and I still struggled through the campaign of trying to speak to the human in them and the human in everybody around me and let them know that we are seriously flawed. But if we show up as our best selves and give our best energy, we're going to get those results. And it takes a while sometimes. So hearing you say that and recognize that, that's the most important thing to me, is for folks to understand that, is that I never at one point sacrificed my blackness for anything that I've gained. I bust my butt to show that it's possible. I was a teenage mom at 15, experienced all the things that we are fighting for, the poverty, the mass incarceration, the homelessness. And I'm here because somebody looked back and said, Shamika, I see something in you. And I had opportunities and choices, and I leaped and took those choices. If it wasn't for that willpower that comes from my ancestors, I wouldn't be in front of you today. And I appreciate you saying
It's the last thing I'm going to say, and then we'll close this out. I was with an artist friend, a black artist friend who's a leader in the art scene here in Louisville. And that friend said, Ramona, as black people, we have spent a great portion of our lives trying to assimilate and be accepted by white people. And but no matter how much we assimilate, people still attack the black body. And we thought, before all the videos came out, that, if we just do it right, they won't kill us, they won't hurt us. But then we watched this white police officer kneel on the neck of George Floyd, and all the people around him were saying, stop, don't do that. And they did it anyway. And then we have white police officers bust into Breonna Taylor's home. And people scream and holler, no, stop, don't do that. Charge those officers. And nothing happened. And this friend said, so what's the purpose in assimilating? What's the purpose in denying our full blackness and our full self if they're still going to do what they're going to do? So let's just fully show up as who we are, and that's okay. And so I thank the young sister for sharing. I thank Shamika for sharing. And all of us, especially those of us who are black and appear in this skin every day, continue to show up. And we invite our neighbors to show up as themselves with us, and let's just do the work together. In our fullness is who we are, because we all bring something unique to the process. So thank you for being here today, and let's keep on moving.
we did it, y'all.